Those who already know me from my past interactions with them, and for those who do not know me, so I'm Dhiraj. I'm part of Nasscom Insights. My primary area of focus is emerging tech and the entire tech startup ecosystem. That includes the deep techs, the non-deep techs, and different aspects of the startup ecosystem, which can be around IP, around funding, around GTM, and so on and so forth. So I'm part of multiple initiatives at Nasscom, wherein we look at different projects at the national level and at state level as well, wherein we're trying to strengthen the tech startup ecosystem, the IP, the fundraising capabilities of the ecosystem, and so on. So with this intro, we'll just get started. So we recently launched this GenAI Startup Landscape report at Future Forge. I'm assuming some of you would have been there at the Future Force. So what we tried to do this time is assess the current state of the GenAI startup ecosystem in India, how it is shaping up. This was the third edition of this report that we did this time. And we're trying to calculate those deltas, those changes from last year, how the momentum has changed from last year, what has changed with respect to the sentiments of the startup founders, what challenges still exist, what opportunities can the Indian GenAI startup ecosystem leverage, and as always, we have our recommendations to the government towards the end of the report. So these recommendations we curate for all of our reports because the government sees us as a trusted voice of the industry, and we represent the entire tech industry at large. So what needs to be done in order to address the challenges, that is what we create for the government. So this is what we'll cover in today's webinar. We'll keep 20 minutes for the discussion, and then we'll open for question answers. We'll start with the global context, then we'll jump into the Indian GenAI startup ecosystem growth, the funding landscape, and then some insights from the interactions that we had with these GenAI startup founders, the challenges that the founders highlighted, and what we saw in the ecosystem basis our analysis, the opportunities, the recommendations that we will be presenting to the government in some time, and then we'll open for discussions. So we start with the global context, and then what I think all of us will agree to, it's the GenAI is no longer in the wild experimentation phase. I mean, the enterprise grade, the modular architecture of the stack that we see right now, it wasn't there last year. And a lot has changed in the GenAI stack from last year, not the fundamentals, but with respect to the layers of the stack itself. So, for example, these service providers that we used to talk about last year were primarily focusing on, the broad level advisory or, how to build those roadmaps, but they were not really focusing on implementation of those roadmaps. Now, the consulting service providers and technology service providers, all of them are now, looking at the implementation capabilities as well. Now they are offering implementation capabilities to their clients. Then the application layer that we used to talk about till last year was a generic one. We used to talk about all the startups which were focusing on text generation, audio generation, image generation, code generation, 3D models generation, so on and so forth. Now we are seeing, a bifurcation where a lot of startups have now started to focus on verticalization. So now they are either looking at legal tech, they're looking at HR tech or fintech or health tech, whatnot. And then there are some startups which are deliberately looking at the horizontals. So they are not operating at a vertical level, but then they are looking at the horizontal layer as well. And then the frameworks layer that we used to talk about till last year, that now includes the agentic AI, the managed LLM layer that we used to talk about till last year, that now includes hubs where, these hubs offer the capability to access multiple models through APIs. And that makes it really simple and easier for the startups to create those, models and applications that they are building using those hubs. The data layer has evolved. Now, vector databases are kind of a mandatory component in the data layer, where, and then this makes sense because a lot of startups that we spoke to and whom we know are now looking at the RAG capabilities to fine tune their solutions for a particular use case or for a particular industry. So for those capabilities, I think the vector databases play a major role. So at large, this is how the tech stack has evolved. And then what we can see on the screen, the startup activity has been explosive globally. More than 4,500 GenAI startups now exist globally, 9x jump over the past 2 years, which is huge. And then this reflects, the enormous appetite of the startup ecosystem, but this also means intensifying competition in the global GenAI landscape. Funding has been showing a similar surge, rising 2.7x to 4 billion in H1 2025, where we were just at somewhere around 20 billion in 2023. Most importantly, 96% of this funding has gone to late stage players, which makes sense, but this shows that investors are consolidating their bets on scalable and infra heavy plays. And we have been seeing some of this trend since last year, but this year it continues, and it's reached to 96%. The US dominates the GenAI startup ecosystem. We all know, thanks to its compute depth, VC muscle, big tech platforms. India ranks fifth when we compare it to its global peers. And if you look deep into these comparisons, the report highlights some contrasts of India with other economies. So, if you just look at Israel versus India, so Israel has a relatively smaller GenAI startup pool. It's way too small when we compare it to India, but then the median funding size is somewhere around $12.5 million, wherein in India it's somewhere around $0.5 million. So having a large GenAI startup pool with low median funding, and when we compare it to Israel, where the startup pool is small, very small, and then the median funding size is larger, which means Israel is focusing on the real deep tech that we talk about, and then the growth rate of startups, GenAI startups in Israel is also low, right? So, this shows that, the goal is not to create a high volume of companies, but to cultivate a select few with the high potential for massive high value exits. And then agentic AI obviously has been in discussions throughout this time, and all of us have been seeing it. Even CB Insights, so 60% of the enterprises, new enterprise AI deployments in 2025 were embedding agentic AI capabilities. And a lot of GitHub activity also shows that, the repositories using agentic AI frameworks, that increased 920% from early 2023, between early 2023 and 2025. So a huge shift towards agentic AI that we saw at the global level. Moving on to the India chapter, where we are seeing an exponential growth in GenAI startups from a small base of 890 startups, from a small base in 2023, where we talked about somewhere around 66 GenAI startups, to 890 plus startups that we see today. This is roughly 3.7x increase in just 1 year. And the most dramatic growth that we see in India is the applications startups. So we now have somewhere over 740 application startups, which are 4 times more than what we saw last year. And these comprise roughly 83% of the ecosystem. Model and infra players account for somewhere around 5% of the Indian GenAI startup ecosystem. What's also interesting is the pivoting phenomenon. So 63% of the GenAI startups that we see today in the Indian ecosystem, they are pivoted. So they are rigorously shifting their models to find market traction. And this seems like a direct consequence of the global democratization of AI through APIs, because the barriers to entry for Indian tech startups is low. And and when we say the US and the other economies are rigorously creating foundation models, so and Indians have access to those foundation models, so now they can enter the application layer and create applications for different use cases on those models. But this is a concern as well, because if we are so much dependent on the foundation models built in other countries, so that's like building an architecture on foreign owned land, which is susceptible to prone to risks or shifts in the pricing or access policies or geopolitical considerations of the global model providers. So we need to be aware of this risk as well. On the innovation front, India's GenAI patents have grown over 1.7x in the past 12 months. This is patent filing, not patent granting. And then this shows that ecosystem is not just building apps, but also contributing to defensible IP in GenAI. Then we move on to the funding aspect. So we see a mixed story here. On one hand, the funding grew 3%, 30% YOY to somewhere around $990 million in H1 2025, which seems healthy, but still a bit modest compared to global peers. The real challenge is in the stage-wise funding distribution. So seed funding has slowed over last year. Late-stage capital is almost non-existent. This essentially traps the startups in an early stage treadmill with limited pathways to scale themselves. This also shows a shift in the VC's behavior, because investors are consciously retreating from two riskiest ends of the GenAI spectrum. So on one end, we have the highly speculative, unproven nature of seed stage concepts, where the risk of failure is the highest. On the other hand, we have the late stage where, this requires a lot of capital and a lot of compute power, and the investors are wary of this fact, and they acknowledge it. So since the startups would need a lot of capital for training and operating large-scale models, so investors are kind of keeping away from this stage as well. So the capital has become concentrated in what investors perceive as the safer middle, where they get clear market traction, they get a near-term viability before committing anything to the startups. Verticalization is one of the trends that we are seeing in the Indian ecosystem as well, because the largest funding rounds that we saw over the past few months were in the vertical AI startups. So we talk about startups like SpotDraft or Cure AI or Brainsight or Spine, and so on and so forth. So all of these startups have been raising good rounds, larger rounds as compared to their peers, which are focusing on horizontal AI. So this reflects the investment thesis and some of the investors that we spoke to. So this clearly reflects the investment thesis, because these investors think that vertical SaaS companies already command higher forward revenue multiples than their horizontal peers. And this also allows GenAI startups to build powerful moats, because if they are verticalized, they are focusing on a vertical, they have access to proprietary data for that industry with the companies that they are working with. Or even if they're not working with those companies, they still have that access to proprietary data. So a better data set leads to more accurate and valuable product, which in turn attracts more customers, and then that generates more quality data for the startups to train their models. So this creates a cycle where these startups keep benefiting from being vertical focused. So we ran a survey with some of the GenAI startup founders, and what we saw during those interactions, and we interviewed some of the startups as well. We have been interacting with them over the past few months. So enterprises are now more mature customers. AI adoption is no longer just a top-down, but business units are also making the buying decisions. This creates new entry points for GenAI startups, Indian GenAI startups, but this also requires faster deployment cycles, because if a business unit is taking a decision, they need faster deployment cycles from the Indian startups. Then technically 64% of the startups are focusing on model efficiency, yet 58% of the startups, somewhere around 58% of the startups, reported that they are not looking at sustainable compute strategy yet, which shows that they are looking at short-term compliance with data security regulations and so on, but then the long-term vision is somewhat lacking. We won't say it's missing completely, but it's somewhat lacking in the Indian tech startup ecosystem. This year, we also saw nearly 70% of the startups using auto-regressive models. This figure was way too low last year, which shows, the focus on the models on the tech stack this year has improved significantly. The data strategy, we saw 79, somewhere around 80% of the startups use proprietary data sets for training their models. But we also saw somewhere around 45% of the startups using synthetic data to train their models. And when we spoke to these startups, many of these startups, they were aware of the risks of using synthetic data, but then they were using synthetic data very cautiously to train the non-critical aspects of their model. And then for the critical aspects and the critical capabilities, they were using proprietary data sets. Partnerships remain underdeveloped in the Indian GenAI startup ecosystem, particularly because 30% of the startups that we spoke to are not engaging in partnerships yet. And the reason that they mentioned was that, they are focusing on building and strengthening internal capabilities first, and then they will look at the partnerships. Those who are looking at partnerships or those who are already engaging with partners, they highlighted two major concerns. One of them was around data privacy and the IP ownership. And we saw these two challenges last year as well. So this seems like a persistent issue in the GenAI startup ecosystem today. And we'll be, focusing on highlighting this to the government, and then if something needs to be done around this, so something will hopefully happen over the next few quarters. This year, we also saw a lot of startups overwhelmingly highlighting two major demands from the government. One was for dedicated funding or dedicated grants for GenAI startups, not a deep tech at large, but for generative AI startups. And then the second one was around high performance compute infra support. So till last year, a lot of startups were talking about if the government should help them with talent pipeline or regulatory sandboxes or something of that sort, or better incubators or accelerators. But then this year, the biggest demand is for these two things. Moving on to the challenges. So as we can see, we highlight the top 10 challenges in the GenAI startup ecosystem, but the top 4 are around compute, GTM, access to patient capital, and GenAI talent. So we start with talent because this is what I think is a bigger challenge than many other challenges that we talk of. Because we boast of having one of the largest pools of STEM graduates, second largest pool of AI talent in the world. But then production grade GenAI talent is still scarce. So we refer to a report from Bain in somewhere around, it was March or April 2025, where the report mentioned by 2027, the AI sector can have somewhere around 2.3 million job openings in India, but the available talent pool will be somewhere around 1.2 million. So that's a huge disconnect. That's a huge gap that needs to be bridged in a timely manner. Then we come to the compute as a challenge. So the cost of essential GPU compute is prohibitive, and we all know, right? I mean, single H100 or a DGX 108 GPU system can go somewhere to around 3 to 4 crores if we go for that 8 GPU system. But this is the type of money that not many startups in India have currently. And considering most of them are relying on government grants, and some of them who have raised capital, the median ticket size was so low that they have to spend that money very cautiously. So it's something that these startups cannot even think of. Then we come on to the capital. we have been talking about patient capital being a challenge for the past 2 years, at least, that I can think of. And this year also, we saw a cautious investment climate. Patient capital is kind of missing in India, and that the investors that we spoke to, they highlighted the talent risk. So they were not really sure if the startups will be able to attract and retain good talent that they need to sustain in the near future, or they also highlighted the issues around compute burn. So a lot of money that they will pour into the startups will straight away go into the compute costs, which are so high as of today. And not that India AI mission is not doing anything to address that. So huge subsidies, and somewhere I think it's now running south of 6 to 7 rupees per hour, but then it's still high for a lot of startups that we spoke to. So these are the issues around patient capital. Then finally, we talk about GTM. So building a brilliant product won't really help the ecosystem unless the startup is able to pitch it to the customers and sell it. So pitching is one part of the process, but then selling it to the customers finally is where the process ends. So a lot of customers, a lot of startups that we spoke to are really struggling with this. So in the report, we have highlighted a set of best practices for all of these GTM processes, from value proposition to messaging to pricing to packaging strategies, sales. How do they build their sales cycle? How do they focus on sales velocity? How do they select their marketing channel or the niche they are operating in? All of these. So we have a set of best practices for all of these aspects of GTM in the report. So together, when we talk about these challenges, these create a vicious cycle, I would say, where startups are locked in the shallow end of GenAI, and they are not really able to cross into the transformative innovation stage that we want to see them in, right? Then there are a lot of opportunities that exist for the GenAI startups in India. So, first of all, they can really carve a moat by building domain-specific AI agents, because and specifically for the regulated industry, because generic models fail brilliantly due to audit or explainability and regulatory gaps. So in such industries, we know that trust, compliance, domain knowledge is paramount. So this is a huge opportunity for Indian GenAI startups. Secondly, the linguistic diversity and mobile-first base that we have in India. And, this seems like a huge gold mine or a big opportunity because this can create a natural market for multi-indic, lightweight LLMs and some voice assistant-based GenAI startups, because a lot of population lives in low broadband penetration areas. So if models are lightweight, so maybe they have a good chance of capturing the market in those areas as well. Then we move on to the third opportunity, which is as enterprises scale from pilots to deployments, they demand agent orchestration or infra layers of workflow automation. Also, because in India, we are seeing a huge demand for agentic workflows. So it would be a great opportunity for startups to focus on the orchestration layers and build something around it. And finally, the DPI. Now, it has not been leveraged to a decent extent yet, not completely, but then Indian government can support the GenAI startups, and the startups can work with the government-backed bodies to integrate their offerings in the DPI, which can accelerate the adoption and the trust for their products significantly. Now, the recommendations. So this is just an overview of what we recommend to the government. The report has a detailed section on the recommendations on each of these pointers, what needs to be done exactly, and how the government should approach it.